Hello, and welcome to Pitt Street Research. My name is Stuart Roberts, and I'm one of the co-founders of our firm. And joining me again from Perth on the afternoon of Thursday, the 17th of April, 2025, is Mr. Nigel Broomham, who's the Managing Director and CEO of Battery Age Minerals, ASX BM8. Nigel, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Stuart. Great to be here again.
The Easter Bunny has clearly arrived in both Perth and Villach in southern Austria. You just announced, looking over some old records, some grades which were higher than we expected for germanium at the project that you're working on there in Germany. Tell us how you came up with such beautiful grades. Like we're talking 1,200, 1,500 parts per million germanium, and we'll talk about in a second about why that's good.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is sort of a previously unpublished article which we've managed to get our hands on, and it was a government led study, but run by the chief geologist of Bleiberg, one of the most published authors on these types of deposits across Europe. And what it speaks to is just, firstly, one thing is how exceptionally high the grades were able to be achieved towards the end of this project's mine life, which speaks to the point that this project did not finish due to a lack of quality of ore. In fact, there's some of the highest grades that were ever achieved. But secondly, just how high those germanium grades are, 1,500 grams per tonne. This is extremely unique and extremely rare, and speaks to the point that we've been speaking to for quite some time, that you'll be hard pressed to find a more prospective project for the strategic metal of germanium globally.
Right. So going back in time, the Bleiberg mine in southern Austria has been mined for centuries, going right back to the Middle Ages. But in recent history, as you say, it fell into the hands of a state-owned company at a time in the early 90s when base metal prices were low. So eventually goes on care and maintenance. But back in the day, this was the sixth largest supplier of germanium. I looked at my notes before, and your best guess was maybe 200 parts per million germanium, which would have been great. That sounds quite economic to me. But it turns out when we talked high grade, we meant exceptionally high grade. How did we miss this the first time round?
Yeah, that's correct. I think the 200 grams per tonne was referenced to as a sort of a long life of mine average grade of
Right.
recoverable
So,
germanium.
just sorry, we're talking parts per million here for germanium, not grams per ton.
It's comparable. Yes,
Okay, right,
grams per
got it. Yeah,
tonne. Yes,
yep.
yeah, yeah. So that sort of life of mine was grams per tonne, about 200 grams per tonne. But what we found is towards the end of the mine life, these guys were achieving on site without the smelting stage. They were achieving grades of over 60% zinc and up to 1,500 grams per tonne of germanium. So just exceptionally high grades. Compared to most other operations in the world, you're talking 100 sub 100. So this is 10, 15 times that.
Right. And for those of us who know our geology, no surprises there. Mississippi Valley style systems tend to be very large and in some cases very, very high grade. This just proves that that's one of those in spades.
Oh, absolutely. This is obviously a very famous deposit, mined for centuries, as you spoke to, and closed in a time where base metal prices were low, and there was potentially a political agenda to reduce the amount of mining in Austria. But that's we believe the tides have changed. Germanium's now an essential and a critical mineral for any future-facing technologies, and there needs to be a sustainably sourced source of this strategic metal within Europe. There needs to be, and we think we're perfectly placed for that.
Right. And the timing of this announcement couldn't be better because, as you pointed out, there are geopolitical issues the world faces. China is now making it difficult to export germanium to the rest of the world out of that country. So you come up with just the right source that people are looking for.
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, it's very well publicised the geopolitical tensions that continue to rift that continues to divide between China and the USA. China completely dominate this space. When you talk about new metal units produced of germanium, it's around 99.8% of any new metal units. It's slightly less of that for global units produced, but most of that is recycling. So for any new metal units, and if you take into consideration the forecast of the Taiwanese Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, which speaks to this being exponentially used within their microchips, there needs to be another alternative outside of a China-controlled area. We think we couldn't be better placed right there in the middle of Europe, which has a booming semiconductor manufacturing industry. There needs to be a sustainably sourced supply of this metal, and we believe we're perfectly placed for that.
You're right next door to a major semiconductor plant in the city of Villach, as I understand.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, so the semiconductor industry is very large through Central Europe, including in the town only 15 kilometres east of us. It's a major employer, and they essentially get their products from some European sources, but ultimately the raw material comes from China. So we believe there needs to be a locally sourced and sustainably sourced supply of this.
Right. Now, the best is yet to come for yourself and Battery Age Minerals. If you look at the research we wrote a while ago, the area that you're targeting for your exploration is considerably larger than the old mine life, the old mine that was worked for centuries. So we could be facing, if you play your cards right, a considerable increase in the resource, and importantly, just going to test the extent of the mineralization in the existing shafts that we use. That could add a fair bit of shareholder value as well. The challenge, obviously, is seasonality. You've got to wait for the weather to thaw in order to drill properly there. Talk to us what's coming up in the next few months.
Yeah, absolutely. So firstly, we've got our permit in, which is currently pending for our maiden drilling application. We expect that back this month, and it's what we're continuing to work towards, and we hope to be drilling there in the European summer. We are targeting the 1st of June, but we'll be waiting on the permits to come back. But secondly, to that point, we obviously have, as you mentioned, a very large tenure package. There's 142 square kilometres around Bleiberg, and we also recently staked another project called Hochber, which is 290 square kilometres across this vast tenure. There is known surface mineralisation mapped. There's tailings and old waste dumps throughout that area. And we will be conducting a sampling and prospecting campaign on these old tailings streams to see if we can find any economic grades within these areas. And that could fast track us towards potentially being an early supplier. So as we know, the grades of germanium weren't the particular focus at the time, and we believe they remain largely untapped. That's the grades for germanium. And we want to go have a look at what's already there on surface, and we'll be doing that in conjunction with our maiden drilling campaign.
Right. Good news here is with grades this high, the processing step might just be able to jump you straight to a refinery rather than have to go through an early stage.
Yeah, that's right. They are potentially, they're extremely significant. They potentially will be applicable for direct chemical refining by European refiners, which means that we could skip the whole zinc smelting step altogether. So not only from an ESG perspective, but economically, if you can retain as much value of that metal yourself without having to go to the zinc smelters, and that's obviously a huge upside for the project and speaks volumes to the quality of it. Right.
Now, one last question. You've got some other projects elsewhere in the world. There was one we talked about recently in Argentina. There's also your work in Canada. Argentina's coming on a lot of people's radar screens again because of the reforms of President Milei. In particular, currency convertibility is coming back again. So that country's more mainstream now when it comes to investors. You're sitting on some pretty lucrative ground in Santa Fe province.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've just returned actually back from the Santa Cruz province,
Santa Cruz,
Argentina.
Right, yep.
Yeah, and just blown away with the scale and potential of the asset. Speaking to the geologists there, having a good yarn with them, we liken it to what we imagined Nevada was 150 years ago. It's just got huge untapped potential. As we spoke about in our last chat, we've got screaming high grades across kilometre scales at surface expression. We know we have high grades. It's just about going to drill it and finding out exactly how much we've got. As far as the region, as you mentioned before, they are extremely happy that we're there. The largest industry they have in the province is mining, and they know that we need to find more ounces in the ground to continue to support their people. So, welcomed in with open arms. Through our visit there, I met with the Secretary of Mining Miss Nadia Ritchie, and she made me feel extremely comfortable and extremely happy and positive to be there.
Right. And when you say Nevada 100 years ago, we're talking like this is another Carlin trend, which is yet to be identified.
Yeah, look, I don't want to pump it too much, mate, but yeah, essentially, it's got all the right ingredients, right? It's got the right rocks. We believe we've got the right people and it's the right jurisdiction, and we're very excited to be there.
All right, early days, but you heard it first here at Pitt Street Research. Nigel Broomham, thanks for joining us, and good luck for the drilling campaign coming up, if all goes to plan, middle of 2025.
Thanks, Stuart. Always a pleasure, mate.